Well, it only records for about 15 minutes and then it cuts me off. So this is part 2. Okay. Well, then where were we? We were right where, John's disciples just got done seeing the things with their own eyes. And, that makes me think of too, for us, when we ask the Lord to, when we ask Him to come into our heart, to help us trust Him and put our faith in Him, our eyes are open too. They're open to see things for ourselves. We don't just have to hear about it from other people. We then have this relationship that it's you and it's your God. It's your Lord. And He will speak to you and He will show you things that then are yours personally. You don't have to just take somebody else's word for it. But so that's what these disciples did. They got to see with their own eyes. They got to see, it says, go back. This is Jesus. He says, go back and tell John what you have seen and heard here today. The blind are now seeing, the crippled are now walking, and those leopards are now cured. Those who were deaf are now hearing, and those who were dead were now raised back to life. The poor and broken are given the hope of salvation. And tell John these words: the blessing of heaven comes upon those who never lose their faith in me, no matter what happens. Now, he's speaking to him, but he's also speaking to us. Because like I said, we all could have felt like we signed up for a better life here on earth when we put our faith in Jesus, and then our life didn't go the way we thought it was supposed to go. And so some people at that point, they turn away and they don't follow Jesus anymore. They stop believing that He is who He said He is. And that is just a really sad thing, because boy, we need all the help we can in this life. We want to continue to strengthen our faith, and that's what you're doing by listening and learning and being encouraged. We want to continue to, no matter what happens. I remember one of our sweet ladies who lived with us, and all of us have stories like this. She had lost her husband, and then she lost her son, and then she lost her daughter. And I know there's many of you that have suffered great loss, but have continued to keep your faith in the Lord. Some people let those things, speak doubt to them, but I know you guys are different. No matter what this life throws at us, God promises, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. He's always with us. And then when our life ends here, it will begin with Him anew in heaven. So Jesus says, the blessings of heaven. Wow, that's going to be amazing, huh? Will come to those who never lose their faith in me, no matter what happens. Well, after John's disciples left, Jesus turned around and He began to speak about John to the audience crowded around Him. He said, what kind of man did you expect to see out in the wilderness? Now remember, that's where John lived. He lived out in the wilderness, and everybody went out there to see him. Did you expect to see a man who was easily influenced and shaken by the shifting opinions of others? Who did you really go out there to see? Did you expect to see a man decked out in splendid fashion of the day? They are the ones who live in the lap of luxury, embracing the values of this world. Or did you discover a true prophet out in the lonely wilderness? Yes, John was a legitimate prophet. Even more than that, he was the fulfillment of Scripture. See, I am sending my prophet messenger who will go ahead of me and prepare hearts to receive me. Now, that was written in the book of Malachi, which is an Old Testament book. John is the only prophet that I believe there, I think he was the only one that was foretold of his coming. I mean, there were lots of other prophets, but God used them. He used them because they were people that looked to God for all their needs, and so God used them to spread their message. But John was different because he was a prophet God foretold even before he was born. Remember the story about Zechariah being in the temple, and the angel comes and tells him he's going to have a child, and Zechariah didn't kind of believe him, so he was struck mute. He couldn't speak until John was born. But then he was a believer. Well, so that's what Jesus is saying. He's saying he was legit. He was a legitimate prophet, even more than that, because he fulfilled what Scripture was saying. He says, throughout history, there was never found a man as great as John the Baptizer. Yet those who walk in God's kingdom realm, though they appear to be insignificant, will become greater, even greater than him. So he's talking because there is a line, there's two covenants. That there's those who lived under the old covenant, and then those who are born and live under the new covenant. So he's just talking about two different covenants at this time. He's talking about how great John is under the old covenant. He was the greatest. But how great even the least of people under the new covenant will be in heaven. So then he goes on and he says, when the common and the disreputable people among the audience heard Jesus say this, they acknowledged that it was the truth, for they had already experienced John's baptism. So you know why they could acknowledge the truth? They could acknowledge because they already put their faith in what John had told them, that the Messiah was coming. So it was like their ears were open, their eyes could see, because they had already opened the door of their heart to believe. And really, that is the key. We can't say, show me and then I'll believe. We have to say, I'll believe, and then God shows us. That's the way it works. It says then, but the hearts of the Jewish religious leaders and experts of the law, they had rejected the clear purpose of God by refusing to be baptized by John. So Jesus continued saying, how could I describe the people of this generation? And he goes on to talk about something that, is a little harder for us to understand but it was happening in those days. But there's a basic message to it. He said, can't you see you're like children playing games on the playground, complaining to friends? You don't like it when you want to play wedding, and you don't like it when we want to play funeral. Why would you neither dance nor mourn? So he's just saying that no matter what we do, no matter whether it was John or whether it was Jesus, you wouldn't be happy. You would criticize because you don't believe. That is really what he's saying, even though what he says is not really hard. It's harder for us to understand. They knew what he was saying in those days. It says, when the prophet John came, feasting and refusing to drink wine, you said that he was crazy. Now remember, this is Jesus still speaking. There's a demon in him. And yet when the Son of Man came and he went to feast and he drank wine, you said, look at this man. He is nothing but a glutton and a drunkard. He spends all his time with tax collectors and other notorious sinners. So, no matter, John, who was so devout and kept all the rules and was out in the wilderness, they said he was crazy. But Jesus, who broke all their rules and befriended people that the Pharisees wouldn't even talk to, they said he was a glutton and a drunkard. He's explaining that no matter what we do, you're not going to believe, and um, you don't see, you're blind. He says, so nevertheless, I say to you, the wisdom of God will be proven by the expression of godliness in everyone who follows me. So we're going to end there. He's telling them that when we follow Jesus, we're going to be known by our fruit. Our lives are going to change. We're going to do things differently because we're following Jesus. So I just